The halls of justice are often paved with the complex intentions of the human heart, and within the sanctuary of her courtroom, Judge Ebony K. Williams stood as the definitive arbiter of truth. She gazed upon the nameplate that sat firmly on her bench, a simple piece of plastic and metal that carried the weight of her authority. To her, that nameplate was a reminder that in this particular space, the only perspective that held the power of law was her own. She brought with her a rich tapestry of heritage, a woman born in North Carolina and raised by the spirit of Louisiana, blending the cool temperament of the West Coast with the sharp, uncompromising edge of New York City. She looked out at the gathered parties, her eyes scanning for any sign of defiance. When she asked if there was a problem, she expected honesty, for her mission was rooted in the most sacred values of the country: freedom and integrity. These were the pillars she strove for every day, whether she was reminding a woman that her authority ended at her own front door or explaining that her court existed to be a voice for those who had been silenced by the world. The courtroom was a microcosm of humanity, filled with people from every sector of life, representing every color of the rainbow and every walk of existence. This was the essence of equal justice. On this particular afternoon, the atmosphere was charged with the peculiar tension of a friendship pushed to its breaking point over a milestone celebration turned sour. The plaintiff, Lillian Winward, a woman who had recently crossed the threshold of her 50th year, stood with a look of profound betrayal. Opposite her sat Benson Sanchez, a man who seemed more annoyed by the inconvenience of the legal proceedings than the weight of the accusations. Judge Williams began the proceedings by acknowledging the parties. Lillian Winward, a devoted vegan, was suing Benson Sanchez for negligence, seeking $850 for what she described as a traumatizing experience during her birthday celebration. The judge, always keen to understand the deeper motivations of those before her, asked Lillian about the origins of her lifestyle. Lillian recounted a haunting memory from her childhood, a moment during an Easter celebration where a pet rabbit had been served as a meal. Since that day, her connection to animals had become emotional and spiritual, a commitment to never see a living being harmed for human consumption. While the judge admitted to enjoying red meat herself, she offered a sincere nod of respect for Lillian's principles. The conflict had its roots in an idyllic 6-bedroom cottage in Rockland, Maine. Lillian had organized the trip for 12 college friends and their significant others to celebrate her 50th birthday. Among the guests was Benson, the new boyfriend of Lillian's longtime friend, Raina Kumar. Before the trip, Lillian had sent a clear message to the group chat, expressing her desire for the house to remain a meat-free zone to honor her beliefs. She had even provided a text message as evidence, which stated that while guests were free to eat meat on the patio, no meat of any kind was to enter the cottage. Benson had responded with a message stating that he ate meat for every meal, but he had followed it with the words, "but okay." In the eyes of the court, those two words represented an agreement. However, once the group arrived at the cottage, the harmony quickly dissolved. Benson had decided to prepare lobsters, boiling them alive inside the kitchen. To Lillian, this was not just a violation of her rules, but a horrific act of cruelty that filled her home with a scent of death. Benson argued that he did not consider lobster to be meat in the traditional sense and claimed that he needed the indoor stove to reach the necessary temperatures for boiling. He viewed Lillian as controlling and uptight, while Lillian felt her sacred space had been desecrated. The tension escalated as the judge reviewed the evidence, including photographs of the lobsters in the pot. Lillian described the sight as traumatizing, noting that she could not look at anything with a face. The judge, with a touch of wit, remarked that the lobsters looked like they might start singing and dancing, yet she understood the gravity of the breach of trust. Despite the conflict, Lillian admitted that the first night of the trip had been lovely, and she had even prepared a vegan meal that everyone seemed to enjoy, though Raina later testified that the guests still craved their meat. After a single night, the emotional weight of the situation became too much for Lillian, and she vacated the premises, effectively ending her own birthday celebration. She felt that since Benson had ruined the second night, he owed her his share of the cottage expenses. Benson, however, remained defiant, telling her to get a life and refusing to pay a single cent. Judge Williams listened to the final arguments, weighing the importance of a promise made against the reality of the experience. She noted that when Benson said the words, "but okay," he had acquiesced to Lillian's terms, however rigid they might have seemed. Because he had violated that agreement and ruined the second night of a milestone celebration, the judge decided that a compromise was in order. She ruled in favor of Lillian, but only for half of the requested amount, granting her $425. As the parties were dismissed, the air remained thick with resentment, a friendship of decades seemingly undone by a few crustaceans and a lack of mutual respect. No sooner had the first case concluded than a new dispute took its place. Marcus Stevens, a man who cherished the vintage camera he had inherited from his father, stood before the judge seeking $388 for repairs. He claimed that his camera had been broken during a neighborhood barbecue hosted by Sarah Goldfield. Marcus had been attending the event with his young son, Jack, and had wandered into the front yard to find a quiet place for a FaceTime call with the boy's mother. He had chosen to sit on a wooden swing hanging from a tree, but as soon as he sat down, the structure snapped, sending him and his camera to the ground. Sarah Goldfield defended herself with a sharp edge, arguing that the swing was clearly intended for children. She testified that earlier in the day, she had warned the entire party that no adults were allowed on the swing. She viewed Marcus's decision to sit there as an act of negligence, both for his own safety and that is of his child. Marcus, however, felt that as a guest on her property, he should have been protected from such hazards. He explained that his camera was his livelihood and a precious memento of his father, one he carried with him everywhere. The judge examined the evidence, looking at the photograph of the small, weathered swing. She questioned why there were no signs indicating the weight limit, but Sarah argued that the swing was located on what was technically city property, near the sidewalk, and was a well-known fixture for the neighborhood children. In her final analysis, Judge Williams looked at the physical reality of the situation. She noted that Marcus was a grown man of significant frame, and the swing was clearly a small, delicate structure intended for a child. She remarked that perhaps he would have been better served by standing or finding a more sturdy place to sit. While she suggested that Sarah might consider a sign in the future to avoid such accidents, she did not find the homeowner legally responsible for the damages to the camera. The judge emphasized the importance of personal responsibility, especially when carrying an item of such high sentimental and financial value. The court ruled in favor of the defendant, dismissing the case of Marcus Stevens. As the gavel fell for the final time that afternoon, the courtroom began to empty. The day had been a testament to the complexities of human interaction, from the broken promises of a birthday trip to the unfortunate collapse of a neighborhood swing. In every case, Judge Ebony K. Williams sought to find the balance between law and logic, reminding everyone that while the world is full of conflict, justice is found in the integrity of our choices and the respect we show to one another. The echoes of the proceedings lingered in the air, a reminder that every story, no matter how small, deserves to be heard with a fair and impartial ear.